Australians will have their first chance to cast their ballots in person this morning in the wake of a fiery second debate between Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese. The two leaders clashed on national security, climate change and issues of character, at times yelling over one another and accusing each other of misleading voters.
Cost of living, aged care and management of the pandemic all featured, with Scott Morrison making a rare concession that he should never have said the vaccine rollout was not a race. It comes as around 550 early voting centres open across the country this morning, 2 weeks out from election day. Both leaders are in Sydney this morning, and travelling with them are our reporters Tom Lowry and Stephanie Boris. Good morning, both of you. Steph, starting with you. You are following the Morrison campaign. How would you describe last night's debate?
Very shouty, Michael, and a lot of argy-bargy. At times we saw the leaders ignoring the moderator and essentially taking over the debate, questioning each other on various policies. The fiery clashes were around a number of policies, including national security, specifically that security deal signed between China and Solomon Islands, as well as cost of living, energy prices, aged care nurses, housing and the National Integrity Commission. Now, it's a very different debate compared to the first one held a few weeks ago. That debate was undecided voters asking questions. Both leaders then were very calm. It was almost very boring, one could say. This time around, just a lot of yelling as journalists were on a panel trying to ask questions of the two leaders, who were quite loud. What did we learn? Not too much. No major policy announcements or clarifications, but a rare admission from the Prime Minister that he got it wrong, essentially, with the vaccine rollout in terms of how he described it. Because what happened last night, apart from journalists asking questions of the two leaders, both Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese were actually allowed to ask questions of one another. And this may give us a little bit of an insight into where the leaders will go in the weeks ahead in terms of attacking each other. And the first question that Mr Anthony Albanese asked Scott Morrison was around the COVID-19 vaccine rollout and whether it was wrong for him to say it was not a race.
Isn't it a fact, Prime Minister, do you now accept that indeed it was a race and you should have secured vaccines earlier?
It was a race, Anthony, and we shouldn't have described it in those terms. But what we did do, working together and closely with the Chief Medical Officer at the time, who was Professor Brendan Murphy, is we were taking care to make sure that the vaccines that were approved in Australia were the right vaccines, and that I could confidently say to Australians, with the support of medical authorities, that they would be safe for Australians.
Now, Steph, one issue that has been discussed at length during the campaign is the establishment of a national anti-corruption watchdog, and that was debated last night.
Yeah, this has been going on for some time, Michael, because Scott Morrison actually made this promise ahead of the last election, but we're still having the conversation now because an anti-national corruption watchdog hasn't been set up. Mr Morrison saying this time round it's not his priority and that he's blaming Labor for not supporting the government's plan. That said, in the past we have seen government change and negotiate their legislation to get things through Parliament, but in this case, Mr Morrison is standing his ground and he is feeling some heat over this, so he tried to essentially throw it back on Mr Albanese last night. Labor has promised to introduce an anti-corruption watchdog by the end of the year, but Mr Morrison was accusing Mr Albanese of not having enough detail.
You haven't allowed any debates on private members' bill.
Private members'
bill? Yeah, I
bill.
have, because previous
people...
you
can do legislation. You just haven't done one for this proposal you're so excited about.
Previous governments,
so
Scott, have allowed for parliamentary debate. We have got a plan, and I'll tell you what the plan is. No. It's a plan that you don't like, because what you want is that the Cabinet has to decide.
There's nothing on it.
Over to you, Tom. Anthony Albanese says he won't be giving a guarantee of real wages growth under a Labor government.
Yeah, good morning, Michael. It was a fairly smooth performance from the opposition leader last night, but there were some interesting moments, particularly this discussion around wages. Wages is absolutely central to Labor's campaign at this election. They're promising they are the better party to deliver wages growth should they win government. But throughout this campaign, we've been pushing the opposition leader as to whether he can guarantee that real wages will rise, and if so, by how much. What's his marker of success? And he's never really given us a clear answer, but we did get something of a clearer picture last night. He was pushed again to guarantee that real wages would increase under a Labor government. All he would say is that it is an objective he would take into government should he win. Now, in fairness, it's a pretty big guarantee to give, with forecasts that inflation is going to rise significantly over the years ahead, and with all the struggles the governments have had in delivering any sort of significant wages growth over the past few years. It would have been a really big commitment to make. Let's have a listen to that exchange.
You can't guarantee that real wages will rise.
The difference between myself and the current government and Scott Morrison is that we will try to do what we can in measures and structures to improve real wages. We will support, for example, minimum wage increases. At the moment, this government won't even do that.
And Tom, Labor has revealed a plan this morning to lift the standard of teachers entering Australian schools.
Yeah, Michael, we haven't seen a huge number of big policy commitments from Labor during this election campaign. There is a pretty sizable one they've detailed this morning, about $150 million over 4 years to improve the standard of teachers entering the education system. What they want to do is offer scholarships to students who achieve an ATAR of 80 or higher. 1,000 of these scholarships would be offered each year, and they'll be paid up to $12,000 in cash each year throughout their teaching degree to try and encourage them into the system. Labor is saying this is a system that's worked quite well overseas, so the results are pretty demonstrable over there. They say the best way to improve education outcomes for students is to have better quality teachers going into the system as well. And they say they want education degrees to be considered like law or medicine degrees are by students shopping around as to what they're going to study. There's also some more money in there for programs like Teach for Australia and the Nexus program as well. That's matching a coalition commitment that was made earlier in this campaign.
Tom, Steph, thank you both for the updates there.